Szanowni Państwo, dzień dobry. Witam Państwa bardzo serdecznie. 60. edycja Krakowskiego Festiwalu Filmowego odbywa się wirtualnie. W tych wyjątkowych okolicznościach cały czas inwestujemy w kulturę, cały czas staramy się pokazywać najlepsze filmy dokumentalne, ale też spotykać się z naszymi wyjątkowymi gośćmi. Dzisiaj z nami są twórcy Fotografa Wojny, jest z nami reżyser Boris Benjamin Bertram i bohater filmu Jan Graup. Spotkanie odbędzie się w języku angielskim, więc oczywiście zapraszam Państwa do partycypowania. As I said, ladies and gentlemen, here let me introduce you to our great special guest that we have the opportunity to talk to today. Here with us, we have the director of the film, Photographer of War, Boris Benjamin Bertram. Hello, Boris.
Hello, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And apparently we have the protagonist of this documentary, titled Photographer of the War, Jan Graup. Hello, Jan.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. So, Jan, let's start with you. I'm super curious, what was the agreement between you and Boris? What was the agreement on where he can go with his camera? What part of life, of your life, he can join to? How did it look like? How did you make this agreement?
Well, the important thing for me was that when I finally agreed with Boris that we could do this film, that it had to be as honest as possible. I didn't want to have some kind of heroic picture towards my life as a photographer, but that he would go all the way in terms of both when I was working, but also privately. So I gave him an all access in order to try and be as a equivalent of what I do, where I get very, very close to people that I portray or photograph. And I think that he should have the same possibilities, which, as you can see in the film, actually turned out, since we had some very dramatic moments within my private life during this process.
And Boris, how much time did you need to convince Jan to make that documentary? When did you guys meet? What was the pretext for make that great film?
Jan and I, we have known each other for almost 10 years, and I have used Jan's still photographies in my previous 2 films. There's something about Jan's pictures in black and white and this kind of poetry in them that has marked me in many ways. So when the opportunity came up that we could work first on a TV series for Danish television that later turned out to be the film, it was for me it was a very natural decision. But I also learned many things on this project working with Jan, because he's so committed. He's been filming in war zones for 30 years, and I wasn't a war photographer. So I lived with Jan for 6 years, going to different war zones and conflict zones. So I also learned a great deal about his profession.
But actually, when was the moment that you decided to make the film? Like, was there any particular moment, was there any particular event that you decided that this is something that actually you want to share with the audience, that you want to share with us, with the viewers?
Well, I can tell you about a specific incident. Jan and I was filming in Central African Republic, where Jan was covering the civil war between Muslims and Christians. And while I was following Jan, it was more or less like urban fighting, and people got slaughtered. I came to Africa like a week later than Jan. And while covering this, he got this phone call from Copenhagen, from the hospital, that his ex-wife Sasha has fainted in her apartment and was seriously ill. And a few days later, he got another call that she was diagnosed with cancer, and we more or less have to return to Copenhagen. And I think on the flight home, we talked about that we should continue this what was like something for TV, to make a longer film, because Jan was in a completely new situation in his life. And he would have to take over the responsibility looking after his 3 children with Sasha. He has 4 children in all, and we thought this would be kind of a turning chapter in his life. So it all started all the way down in Africa, actually in Bangui.
Jan, you mentioned about that moment, you talk about that moment in the film. You say that actually when your wife was alive, you were sure that actually in some case your children would stay with her. And you say that actually that moment, the moment that she passed away actually changed everything in your life. I am just super curious, like, how did you deal with all of this emotional baggage that this event brings to you? Like, was it something that actually you have any thoughts about leaving, photographing the war zones and staying only with your children? Or you were like 100% sure from the very beginning that you have to find a solution, that you have to find a way how to continue both of the lives as a father and as a war photographer?
Well, there was a lot of discussions between me and my children during this period, because one thing was that I, from a mental point of view, was thinking about what could I do, because you know, at the end of the day, the most important thing was to navigate my children through the fact that they were losing a parent. And that made everything a little bit chaotic in terms of how I could continue my work around the world, which I am doing even today. So we had a lot of discussions about how and why we should do this, or whether I could continue doing what I did. Fortunately, the kids have grown up; they are pretty old now, and they know and have the same philosophy, if you'd like, as I do, that telling stories from around the world is really important, because we live in a very privileged part of the world, whether it's in Poland or in Denmark or in the rest of Europe. And there's a very, very interesting point of us telling stories about people who have less possibilities than we have. And my kids agreed on that, even though that it brings me in very dangerous situations once in a while. But it's an ongoing discussion. It's something that we go through on a regular basis. And my kids can actually veto me going somewhere, and I can veto their veto by trying to persuade them to let me continue my work.
So actually that was your idea from the very beginning. That was the reason why you decided to become a war photographer, because you wanted to present the war of the unprivileged people to the privileged people?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of issues on that in terms of that. First of all, we've just been going through a coronavirus, and in Denmark, the death toll is somewhere between 500 or 600. There are 8,000 children dying of starvation every day. Just as a reminder that the world is somewhat bigger than what we experience on national TV broadcasts and through this pandemic. And it's not to say that that's not interesting or important to cover and that we need to find a solution. I'm merely saying that there are people who are in situations around the world where they are extremely vulnerable, and they are a part of a conflict that they have no saying in whatsoever. They have no doing in them whatsoever, and their stories need to be told as well.
Mm-hmm. Boris, in the film, actually, you use only mostly photography from the war zones. We can mostly see the work of Jan. You do not show, you do not present, you do not talk much about what happened there. And I was curious, why did you decide to resign from that aspect? Why did you resign from commenting on that?
Well, first of all, Jan and I wanted to make a film without filter. We wanted this film to have this sense of being there with Jan, and I'm a big fan of letting the audience make up their own decisions, and to interpret Jan's life and him being a father on their own terms. I'm not a journalist. I'm an artist. I didn't want to do like a commentary film where Jan is interviewed the whole film through. what we did here, Jan gave me completely access to his life. And I think you can understand that, you know, watching the film, you can make up your own mind, and you can actually get an understanding of what is, you know, what drives Jan as a photographer, and also the big choice in life, being a father of 4 children. And what's kind of also interesting for Jan and I doing the film was that he was in a new situation. And for me, this film is very much about a man who has to, I mean, Jan has always been present with his children, but he has a much bigger responsibility in the film, taking over as the sole parent. And I think the film is also a study in how do you become a family? How do you support each other? And so for me, the film is very much about a family and how to be a family. It's also a professional portrait, but it's also a family drama in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Jan, and how did you feel in this new situation that you are no longer the one who is taking the pictures, who is shooting everything around, but you are the one who is shooted, who was actually cameraist around?
Well, it was terrible. In every sense, I hated every moment. Because, you know, when I go somewhere, I go there because there's a story that I really want to tell. And I think that the people who are in front of my camera are the most important ones. It also gave me an understanding, which is actually very, very interesting from my point of view since the film, because I use it in my own work today, which is how intimidating it is to have a camera crew following your life at a very, very short distance, you know, so that they are there the entire time. So it has given me a lot of respect towards the people who let me into their life when they are in vulnerable situations. So in terms of that, it was an eye-opener, and has just given me a lot more respect for the people who are willing to let me photograph very intimate, very close up details in their own lives. And then I have to say, I mean, Boris and I are good friends, but working with a film director is living nightmare. They are slow and they take up too much space, and you know, they are all around you all the time. It's very, very frustrating.
But did you have any moment that actually you asked Boris to turn off the camera? Was there any moment that actually you didn't want him to be present in your life, or did you give him the full access?
I gave him full access. There was situations where I was meeting with people who were in war situations, where the intimacy between the people that I photographed and me was very important. And the fact that there would be a third party filming me in that situation would be simply too much. And in these situations, I asked Boris to step back a little bit. I didn't tell him he could not photograph or film, but I told him to step a little bit back, so I had this very intimate moment with the people that I needed to portray.
And Boris, what about you? Like, did you have any moment that you was thinking that actually this is not the good time for shooting, that this is the moment that actually Jan should be left alone and that you should stay out of it, or did you follow everything?
I think it's important to mention that I worked with some really great photographers with me. I also did some of the filming myself, the famous laundry scene, for instance. And I also filmed at the funeral when Sasha died, Jan's ex-wife. There were also period during when Sasha was sick where I didn't film, where the family was, you know, where I felt they had the need to be alone. When we were in Mosul, during the Battle of Mosul, I think there was a crucial moment where Jan asked us to stay in our car, and he left with our fixer and helper Rebin to take those what should I call it, notorious pictures of the shooting in the alley of you know, 17 civilians shot down on close hold. And Jan asked us to stay in the car because it was too critical, and they also almost got killed taking those pictures. So I think Jan has a special you know, intuition about when to step back and for, you know, 30 years of shooting in these conflict zones. So Jan was guiding us all the way. But I think more or less we covered almost everything with him in Mosul.
You have to realize that it's a very interesting aspect in a situation where I mean, you should look upon your own life when you have an argument with your wife or your girlfriend, or you have to take your kids to school, or if you have a bad day, to have a camera on you 24/7. It's a very, very big obligation. So you have to believe in the art of filmmaking and the art of documentary film to let people this close to your life, because otherwise it would be a portrait which would not be honest. And Boris and we shook hands very, very early on in this production, that this had to be honest. It had to be both the good sides and the bad sides. And from my point of view, I mean, I'm not the best father in the world. I have no problem telling people that I feel like this, and that people can be torn apart being a photographer which works in war zones, and the fact that you have an obligation back home. And I know that there has been discussions whether this is responsible or not, but that's a part of my life, and that's a part of the storyline for people to actually sit with, you know, how would I and how would other people react in a situation like this?
But are you not afraid of the reception of that film, that actually some people might think that what kind of father he is, his children lost his wife and he is continuing his risky career instead of like focusing only on them? Aren't you afraid that some group of the people can think like that and criticize you?
Absolutely. But otherwise, I mean, if you made a documentary and not showing this conflict within my private life and my work life, it wouldn't be a documentary. It would be something completely different. And I'm not really too interested in what people think of me. To be honest, I don't give a shit. I'm just trying to be honest and give people an inside view to the dilemmas of my life.
I have to tell you that I was absolutely amazed by this documentary, and I absolutely couldn't believe like that it's even possible for you to go to the war zone and then return to your home and have your happy life with your family. Like, I was wondering all the time, like, what is your way to get rid of all of these emotions? How are you managing? How are you coping? How are you dealing with them? Like, what is your secret?
Well, I mean, it's not always as easy as it sounds. You know, I am diagnosed with post-traumatic stress. I have to eat medication every day because of that. And this has to do with my life going all the way back to the first Gulf War and even previous of that. And into now. So it's not always a happy life. It has a lot of consequences, and that is also a part of Boris's film. On the other hand, I think that throughout the years, I've become in a situation where I am able to be present where I am, which basically means that when I go into Copenhagen Airport and I'm going to Mosul, I am very, very focused on the work that I'm going to do there. And I don't spend too much time thinking about the kids. Whereas when I'm back home, I tend to spend as much time and be present in their lives. And for me, that has been the thing that worked. The worst thing that you can do as a photographer like myself is that if I go to a war zone and keep thinking about the kids and that I want to go home, I'm not present there and therefore not able to document life of what is going on there as well as I actually can. So it's about being focused in the present where you actually are.
It's really interesting in terms of that actually you are the one who decides that you are doing a job that is pretty risky. You are the one who is taking the risk, but actually all of the people who are around you, they are also put in the position of the risk because of you. So I was just curious if we try to make it backwards, if we try to make it inside out, and if any of your children would stay and say that actually he or she wants to do that job like you do, that he or she wants to become a war photographer, how would you react? Would you support him or her, or absolutely you would be not okay with that?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. I would like to say that I would be okay with it. On the other hand, I lost many very, very good friends and colleagues. And it's been very painful. And I, of course, know about how it is mentally for me. And, you know, again, regarding the post-traumatic stress, it's a job that comes with a lot of consequences. It's a job that, that will follow you for the rest of your life. I still have nightmares, waking up in the middle of the night from what happened during the genocide in Rwanda in '94. Mm-hmm. So it's not an easy job. I understand that many people see it as a very prestigious job and maybe even a shortcut to fame. But you have to realize that at the end of the day, there is a lot of psychological consequences to this. So I would like to say that I would give them the opportunity, but if I could, I would stop them right away. But I'll give you a good example. My oldest daughter, I thought she was in Berlin working as a waiter. And then it turned out that she had moved on to Greece to smuggle refugees, Syrian refugees into Europe from Turkey. So, you know, she kind of got it from back home. She has a very big empathetic heart and wants to work with refugees. She speaks fluently Arabic now. And wants to help with relief agencies, which is an amazing job. So I don't really control my children. I try to give them as many possibilities as absolutely possible.
Mm-hmm. And Boris, how about you? Like, did the visits in the war zones with Ian, did it change you anyhow? What kind of impact it had on you? How did you cope with the presence there?
I mean, to be honest, I'm very proud of the film and we did together. Also because when Jan and I shaked hands on this film, we agreed that we only had 3 rules for making the film: that it should be a film without filter. Jan's children had a say on the editing; they had to approve everything in the film. And if it was too dangerous, Jan couldn't tell us not to film in war zones. Personally, I think the trips we made to Mosul has changed me. Being in an urban war zone like Mosul, who, as many professional journalists will describe it as another Stalingrad. I mean, that has changed me forever. No doubt about it. But I was also prepared for doing this. I had a great photographer with me who supported me a lot, Henrik Ibsen. And Jan was very honest about that he also wanted this film to be an honest portrait. And you cannot make a portrait of a war photographer just, you know, filming flowers. You have to be there. And we were with Jan all the time. And that also made me understand what he's going through. I really didn't have a clue when I started, and I hope that people can also see that, you know, he's struggling with things. He's also arguing with his children sometimes. He's going over the line sometimes because of 30 years of this exploration of photography that we need to see to understand the world. No, for me, the film has definitely changed my soul, mm-hmm. and it's sometimes for the worse. But I'm very proud of our work.
Can I just say, because I have to leave in a couple of minutes, I just want to say that besides the film, I hope that this film also gives the audience a possibility to actually see what other people are going through and how privileged we are, whether it's in Denmark or in Poland or in Hungary or whatever in Europe. We are extremely privileged. And we should also always cherish the fact that we have all these possibilities in our lives. But hopefully this film also gives people a possibility to see that life is a fragile thing. Stuff happens in my personal life, in my private life, but indeed around the world. And that we, with all this free value and this economy we have boosting in Europe, we have an obligation and a responsibility for people to actually care what's going on outside our own borders.
Thank you so much for this message. Guys, the last question, as we have only 3 minutes, can you tell our viewers how were you managing with editing this film? Boris, did you make the editing on yourself, and Danię, you had to accept it, or did you work together? How did it look like?
Well, I mean, I can tell, yeah, I can say from my point of view that I gave Boris full access, so I didn't participate in the editing. Boris was very, very generous because he also got very close with my children, so they had a possibility to go through the film and discuss the editing throughout it. And from my point of view, I would hate for someone else to edit my work, and therefore I gave Boris full access.
Mm-hmm.
We had a long process. I mean, this film took 6 years to make, and we did you know, in different stages. We worked on the film in the editing with Charlotte Munk-Bengtsen, a great editor, and I think in the beginning it was more a personal portrait, and it became more and more a family drama. And I would also like to state that we're also living in a time of fake news, and a lot of photographers are doing really hard work to deliver material that are showing us what is really going on, what is actually the truth out there. So for me, this film is also a recognition of all these photographers out in the world doing this work. It's super hard to get like insurance when you're out in the field right now. The magazines are not paying a lot of money. It's a very tough job to you know, to capture the truth out there. So that's also something we wanted with this film. And in the editing, it was important that we balance the personal life of Jan with the professional life. And I think it gives the film a very strong dynamic, which we really worked on. Also making these really, you know, pretty tough, you know, cuts where you are in Copenhagen and then you're in Iraq. I mean, it definitely helped the pace in the film, which is very, you know, very long takes. It's super honest scenes, you know. It's very much back to the old school of making documentaries, cinema verite, where you don't have a commentary, you know. And so that was some of the ideas behind the editing.
Mm-hmm.
To have real scenes.
Great, thank you so much for this wonderful movie, and thank you so much for being here with us. Our guests were the director, Boris Benjamin Bertram, and the titled photographer of war, Jan Graub. Thank you so much, gentlemen, and hopefully next time we see each other here in Poland, in Kraków, face to face.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.